All right, let's dive right into this explainer and completely unpack the hidden neuroscience and psychology behind why people constantly cut you off mid-sentence. You know the exact feeling, right? You're sharing something deeply important. You take a fraction of a second to breathe, and boom, suddenly your voice is hijacked. Today, we're going to decode the biological reality and the hidden psychological games driving the chronic interrupter. And honestly, more importantly, we're going to look at exactly how you can finally take your power back. Seriously. I want you to think back to the very last time this happened to you. Maybe it was at a super crowded dinner table or, one of those incredibly tense meetings at work. You get cut off and your blood just boils. Your jaw clenches up. You're left sitting there with this heavy, almost suffocating feeling of invisible disrespect. And, well, it sounds a little dramatic, but neurologically speaking, being forcefully interrupted triggers the exact same acute stress response in your brain's amygdala as an actual physical threat. So you swallow your words, kind of shrink back into your chair, and you can't help but wonder, do my thoughts just not matter? Now, society has a really convenient label for these people. We just assume they're incredibly rude, socially unaware, and driven by this massive, unchecked ego. But we really need to challenge that assumption today. Because modern neuroscience actually reveals a completely different and frankly, absolutely fascinating reality. As you're about to see, interrupters actually fall into 3 entirely distinct cognitive profiles.
Okay, so here is our roadmap for this explainer. 1. The anatomy of an interruption. 2. The cooperative overlapper. 3. The neurodivergent brain. 4. The conversational narcissist. 5. The silent hierarchy. And finally, 6. Taking your power back.
Let's start with section 1, the anatomy of an interruption, the neuroscience of being cut off. So while it is incredibly easy to just label someone as lacking empathy, the data actually shows that when you feel that sudden flush of heat traveling up your neck, the person sitting across from you is operating from one of 3 very distinct neurological playbooks. Now, one of them absolutely is a toxic power play, for sure, but the other 2, they literally have nothing to do with arrogance. They're all about how specific neurological hardware processes time, affection, and dopamine. And here's the thing, until you know exactly which type is sitting across from you, you are always going to be the one left in silence. Moving right into section 2, the cooperative overlapper, when interrupting is affection. Okay, this is a concept coined by sociolinguist Deborah Tannen, and it shows us that for what she calls a cooperative overlapper, waiting silently actually feels cold and completely unengaged. Like if they just sit there, nod, and wait for you to finish your story about a really stressful day, they genuinely feel like they're abandoning you. By jumping in, they're desperately trying to communicate, hey, I am with you, I see you, and I am experiencing your emotions so intensely that I just can't contain my verbal reactions. They really aren't trying to push you off the stage at all. They're basically trying to perform a duet with you. And this perfectly illustrates why it feels so intensely insulting to you anyway. It's a pacing clash. Your methodical brain really values pauses and carefully constructs thoughts. So when that silence is invaded, your brain registers a total hostile takeover. But on the flip side, their rapid processing brain treats a conversation like a high-speed game of ping pong. If there's a pause, they just assume the game is stalling out, so they enthusiastically serve another ball to keep the energy alive. Your methodical brain feels dominated, while they think they're just harmonizing with you. Let's look at section 3, the neurodivergent brain, a neurological emergency. So the really crucial point here is that for someone dealing with ADHD or hyperactive processing, interrupting is not malice at all. It's actually a desperate act of cognitive survival. You see, in a neurotypical brain, working memory acts kind of like a mental sticky note with a pause button. You can hold the thought, listen, and then just bring it up later. But for the neurodivergent brain, that sticky note is literally on fire. They know with absolute terrifying certainty that if they don't say this specific connection out loud in this exact microsecond, it is going to vanish into the abyss forever. And this creates a pretty tragic cycle of a dopamine hijack, because ADHD is fundamentally a dopamine deficiency, right? Making a sudden connection gives their brain a desperately needed hit of dopamine. If they try to force themselves to hold it in, it actually creates a literal, unbearable physical pressure right behind their eyes until the dam finally breaks. But here's the most important thing you need to take away from this. Unlike toxic manipulators, these interrupters are acutely self-aware. The very second they see you sigh or get frustrated, that dopamine crash hits them hard. They drown in guilt and shame for a hardware glitch that they just can't control. All right, section 4, the conversational narcissist, the invisible economy of attention. Back in the 1970s, sociologist Charles Derber noted that conversation is basically an invisible economy of attention. Well, the conversational narcissist is a thief in that economy. They know exactly what they're doing. They operate using a heavily researched linguistic weapon known as the shift response. They aren't just cutting you off to shut you up. They are cutting you off to completely steal the spotlight. They basically extract dopamine from your submission to feed their own terrifyingly fragile ego.
Just notice how a healthy, emotionally mature support response keeps the camera firmly on you. But the narcissistic shift response violently rips that spotlight away. For example, if you say you're feeling completely burned out, they'll immediately interrupt to say how they haven't slept in a week. Boom! Your pain is erased, your story is gone, and you are immediately forced right back into the role of being their audience.
Now, be warned here, because conversational narcissists will very often wrap their shift response under this fake, sickeningly sweet layer of empathy. They'll say something like, "Oh, I totally understand exactly how you feel because when I went through that," right? They use the illusion of relation to execute the hijack. And you just sit there nodding politely, not even realizing that your emotional pocket has just been picked by an absolute emotional vampire.
Section 5 now, the silent hierarchy. The architecture of dominance.
Sociological data completely proves that interruptions are almost never random. Literally, just look at any boardroom. Interruptions flow strictly downward along the lines of power. Bosses cut off employees exponentially more than the reverse. And there's extensive linguistic research proving the phenomenon of manterrupting, where women are interrupted at significantly higher rates regardless of their actual expertise. It really is this primal, almost animalistic display of dominance, silently training everyone in the room on who exactly owns the airspace.
And I have to say, the psychological toll of enduring this kind of power play is just devastating. It leads to this state known as ego erosion. When your sentences are constantly being severed in half, your nervous system actually adopts learned helplessness. You start unconsciously editing yourself. You lower your voice. You shrink. You start convincing yourself that staying quiet is just being mature, when in reality, your silence has literally become a trauma response and a signed contract of submission.
Let's get to section 6, taking your power back, the neurological blueprint.
First and foremost, and this is so incredibly important, do not talk louder. The absolute worst thing you can possibly do when someone violently cuts you off is to start a chaotic, overlapping shouting match. It immediately spikes your cortisol, it signals to them that you've lost emotional control, and it plays right into the dominant interrupter's hands.
Instead, I want to walk you strictly through a terrifyingly effective psychological weapon. Step 1 is the unblinking pause. Stop talking immediately, but whatever you do, do not look away or nod. Hold completely neutral eye contact. Step 2 is the 3-second silence. Once they finish their intrusive thought, do not respond. Just let the suffocating weight of their interruption hang right there in the air for exactly 3 seconds. And step 3, the calm statement. In a flat, completely unwavering voice, say just 4 words. I was not finished. Then pick up exactly on the syllable where you left off. Using this, you ruthlessly enforce a cognitive boundary without ever once raising your voice. Now, what if a narcissist tries to use that shift response we talked about to hijack the entire topic? You use the perfect secondary defense, which is called the bridge-back technique. Basically, you physically take the spotlight, turn it around, and aim it right back at yourself. You might say, "That sounds incredibly difficult for you." But as I was saying, you aren't starting a fight. You're just leaving a little room for empathy while calmly and firmly dismantling their manipulation.
So now that you actually understand the hidden machinery of the interrupting mind, you finally get to choose how to respond. And I want to leave you with this final kind of provocative thought. Which type of interrupter do you deal with the most in your daily life? Is it the loving overlapper, the fast-thinking neurodivergent, or the emotionally draining narcissist? Go ahead and apply this new psychological lens to your own relationships. Take your airspace back and never stop decoding human behavior.